Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I am an Episcopal priest, and I live here in Austin, Texas. I've had the gift of recovery since December the 27th of 1972. If you're enjoying these podcasts, do me a favor and hit the like button and the subscribe and all that good stuff, and be sure to tell a friend. We really appreciate that. This is the fourth episode in a series I've been doing focused on a book by a Jungian analyst. His name is Dr. Jim Hollis. The title of the book is Living Between Worlds, Finding Personal Resilience. How do you put up with what's going on around you in changing times? And there's a link to it in the show notes. Recommend it highly, and recommend that you get a hold of any number of books that Hollis has out there. Also has quite a showing on YouTube, so get those for free, and pretty enjoyable. This is heavy stuff. I want to make that admission right up front. Some difficult material that he's dealing with here, but what he's trying to do is to describe what's going on underneath the hood, what's happening in the unconscious mind to the best of our abilities. I try to, kind of gear this to alcoholics and addicts, because we're trying to figure out what the hell is going on inside of us. Why do I keep doing the things that I'm doing when a huge part of me, my conscious mind, wants to stop doing them, but I do them anyway. So that's what this is about. Not going to repeat a bunch of stuff because we're already nearly halfway through the book. In Chapter 4, Hollis shares with us 3 major lessons that he learned after practicing depth psychology. That's what they call Jungian analysis, depth psychology. So he studied this and practiced it over the course of many, many years. And the first lesson he identifies is, it's not about what it's about. And by that, I think he means we need to look below the surface of life to figure out what is it that's really going on there, particularly in the unconscious mind. And this is particularly true for what he calls our stuck places, complexes, energy locuses, I guess that's the plural, within us, where there's lots of energy around them, and that energy takes charge of our minds, in effect, and gets us doing things that our conscious mind might not want to do at all. So these stuck places are the things that trip us up over and over and over again. And if you're an addict like I am, that's the major one that we're going to be talking about here, okay? So, we always resolve with great fanfare, usually, that this time it isn't going to happen. This time they won't trip us up. But before long, they do. You know the role. So willpower, wonderful as it is, just doesn't seem to work with the unconscious mind. The unconscious is more powerful than the conscious mind. And that's why we in recovery need to find a power that's even more powerful than the unconscious mind. So that's step 2, and I think we're going to touch on that in today's episode. All right, so what's going on here? What are these forces that are at work within us? Why are they so powerful? Why exactly are they keeping us stuck? Well, this is where Hollis says depth psychology can be of some real help. He says it has much to do with anxiety, and that we've developed sets of what he terms protective mechanisms rooted in the unconscious mind that are trying to protect us from that anxiety. And that's kind of the bottom line understanding of what it is that's going on here. I'm going to repeat that. He says it has much to do with anxiety, and specifically the anxiety that caused us to develop protective mechanisms rooted in the unconscious. And so we're trying the best we can to protect ourselves from that anxiety. And what we wind up doing is causing more and more of the same damn stuff. Maybe you've heard people in the program say, drinking or drugging or food or sex, in the beginning, they were my friends. They really helped me to cope. Maybe they even kept me alive for a time. Until what? Until they no longer did. And until they were actually threatening my life. Some people make the case that if you're not talking about life-threatening levels of conflict going on within us, you probably may not be talking about addiction. I mean, addiction is a killer. It's squeezing the life out of us. Hollis uses the analogy, doesn't use it specifically, but that's what he's talking about here, is this iceberg analogy. You've probably heard it if you went through treatment or some people in AA were trying to explain what an unmanageable life is or what the unconscious is like. They may have used the iceberg example. They certainly did with me. It's helpful. So that model says that the mind is like an iceberg, and maybe 20 or 30% of the iceberg of the mind, if you will, is above the waterline. We can see that, all right? But 70 or 80% of it is hidden. It's below the waterline. It's there, but it's not visible. It's not readily discernible. And this hidden part is, of course, the unconscious. So what's going on down there? What's happening beneath the surface? See, traditional psychology and psychiatry, they don't really go into this depth stuff. They kind of stay on the behavioral surface of things. We talked about that in the last episode. But Jungian psychology, depth psychology, is going to go beyond that. It's going to venture into areas that used to be the realm of the religious behaviors and patterns and things of that nature. They kind of dealt with that, the metaphysical, the beyond the physical. Traditional psychology, kind of afraid to go there. But the big book, I don't think, is afraid to go there. And then I think it's really important. It says, we needed to get down to root causes, that our drinking was but a symptom. I mean, they were smart enough to know something very powerful is going on here. Not at the brain chemistry, what happens once we take the drink. That's not going to be terribly helpful. It is helpful to know why, what's happening there. But it's what is going on in the mind that we resolve not to drink, and yet we do the very thing we're trying not to do. That's the unconscious. To me, that's the unmanageable. Boy, I was taught very early, connected with that level of understanding, and you're going to be ahead of the game. So we're up against powers that are far greater than our own willpower, and they are not a part of our typical ego consciousness. All right? So what is going on? Hollis encourages us to ask not why is this happening, but instead he jumps to another question, and that is this: what anxiety is my stuckness trying to protect me from? Certainly in its original form, when it first came, what was it attempting? How was it attempting to help me? All right? So, he says, paraphrase a little bit here, he says, when I was little and defenseless and surrounded by a world of giants, where did I find comfort? Where did I find shelter from the storm? Where did I find a behavior or a substance or a set of thoughts or complexes that I could turn to that would lessen the anxiety and try to make it all go away? I was visiting with somebody the other day, and we were sharing a little bit of our addiction histories, and we both copped to, we didn't start with alcohol. We started with candy bars, We both grew up in dysfunctional families, and we needed relief in a hurry. We weren't going to wait till the bar was open. So we went to candy, we went to food, went early to smoking. These things bring some measure of relief at the unconscious level. Okay? So they're good. I mean, their intention is good. All right? What happens, not so good. Hollis says, start by moving away from calling it even anxiety. That you do much better in depth psychology by calling it fear. He says anxiety is hard to confront. It's amorphous. It gets away from us, eh? But fears, these can be specific, and therefore they can be confronted. Sounds like very much like the big book, eh? We listed our fears. We faced them. We put them down on paper. Actually, I had a therapist I was working with in fairly early recovery, and he said, might even be more helpful not to use the word fear, but terror. So I'd suggest you might try that one. What are the terrors that are going on deep inside of you that are life-threatening, at some level? Because why? Because I'm a kid inside, and I got stuck at that level. That's what the stuckness is about. When my feeling is disproportionate to the event, it's usually at some level of immaturity, of inner child stuff, Billy the Kid, that's going on, not at the conscious level, but at the level of the unconscious, all right? And this is some of the stuff that can certainly come up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, It did have a sponsor. One of the most brilliant things he said is, Bill, never trust a thought that, comes after 9 o'clock at night. Ooh, the demons are kind of let loose there. They have freedom to frolic, and they're going to attack me in some ways. So doesn't the world look very different in the morning, when the sunlight is there, the sunlight of the spirit, Yeah, it does for me. The demons can really come out at night. Okay, whatever we call them, fears, terrors, doesn't matter. Hollis traces, as I say, most of them back to childhood, back to where most of them originated, perhaps not all, certainly not all in the case of trauma or military trauma or things of that nature. Most of them originate in childhood, and it's very helpful to trace them back there. So he lists 2 big fear categories, let's say, that he then goes on to describe. The first one is fear of abandonment. I'm going to be left behind. I'm going to be left out. I'm not going to be taken care of. All right? And the second one is fear of being overwhelmed. This is more than I can handle. All right? So imagine that you're 5, 4 years old, maybe even younger, and all of this stuff is coming at you. And you're born into a dysfunctional family and fears that you're not able to manage are happening deep within me. He writes this: all of our anxieties, the existential threats to our well-being, can be cataloged under the twin categories of overwhelming fears and abandonment fears. We learn early that the world is big and we are not. We learn that we are powerless against so many forces out there. And he writes this: thus the world that we receive defines us until we learn otherwise. It's a nice sentence that kind of sums up recovery. We received a dysfunctional world, and we perhaps participated in the formation of a dysfunctional world within ourselves, but it doesn't have to stay that way. Once we learn otherwise and work the program deeply in our lives, things can change. That's what resilience means. We don't have to stay stuck in our small worlds. We can escape. We can be freed. And it's an adventure. I hope if these podcasts have any intention, it is exactly that, to help us see that recovery is an adventure. It's a discovery of who we are. So it's not just finding the pathological stuff that's down there. It's also finding the inner resources that are down there as well. He gives an example from his own life, but I think it might be more instructive to look at abandonment from the standpoint of Bill Wilson. His early history isn't too well known in the program. There is a book called Bill Wilson, Bill W., My First 40 Years. It's published by Hazelden. He talked into a microphone and was trying to record his early life when they were writing a biography of him. It's really a classic. I wish it were better known. But anyway, he talks there about his family of origin. And I love it when somebody is telling their story and they start with their family of origin. I mean, they didn't just start drinking at, 12, 15, 18, whatever it might have been. That's not where their life began. And they were deeply, deeply influenced by stuff that was happening before them. So anyway, here's Bill. He's born into a family in Vermont there, okay? And his father abandons the family. He goes out west and never returns. Bill is devastated, as would any kid be. The role model, the man he looked to, even if he was a drinker. We still look up to these giants, all right? He abandons them. And then, not too long after that, Bill's mother abandons him too. She leaves him, goes off to become an osteopathic physician. All right, she's got to support the family, I guess. Leaves Bill with his grandparents. And she added insult to injury. She took his sister with him, but she left him behind. Well, how the hell do you think that felt, huh? Abandonment. He married Lois, and he said in an offhand remark, I think I was looking for my mother. She was several years older than he was. How many of us do that? We carry these wounds within us, and then we spend the rest of our life unaware of them and trying to soothe them with stuff that may work at first, but in the end is not really satisfactory. So there's Bill. He's left with huge gaping holes in his psyche, in his more complete self, his mind, his unconscious, his soul, his spirit, the deepest elements that make up Bill Wilson. All right? And that was the fertile ground, if you will, for alcoholism. I mean, he had the physical predisposition. He came by that one legitimately. But the mental piece is really, really helpful. It's really helpful to examine ourselves in light of this and look inside, look under the hood and see what was going on, particularly when I was a kid, okay? How did Bill deal with his abandonment? He buried the hurt. He didn't examine it. He attempted, and this is really clear in his story, he said, I set off to become a number one man. I was going to prove myself. I was going to prove that I could get by in the world. I was going to prove to myself that I could handle this thing. How? By succeeding. So he becomes a baseball player in high school, He picks up the violin, He learns to throw the boomerang. His grandfather said, well, you're not an Australian, you'll never master this. Well, that's what he needed, was the challenge, you see. He had that challenge, and he took it. I'll show you. Now, you want to start getting into Bill Wilson's mind, you got to start seeing the little kid who's so hurt and so alone, right? And seeking to prove himself to the world. I'll show that mother of mine. I'll show that father of mine, I don't need anybody, Just need a little drink now and then. All right. Okay, so there he is. He's stuck in his alcoholism. All right. Hollis encourages us to examine these stuck places inside. And he's big on kind of giving us some questions to ask of ourselves. I find them very helpful. He says, what anxiety will be generated if I stop being stuck? Will I have to face something that feels overwhelming to me and step out into the world to take it on? See, being stuck and staying stuck has certain advantages. I don't have to grow up. Or will I have to walk the shaky plank, he writes, of diminished self-esteem to show up as myself in this strange theatrical production I call my life? If we want to understand ourselves, look at our lives. That's the ground zero. We're going to discover who we are at some very, very deep levels. This may not be for everybody, There are some people, just like Wilson, who want to go to a certain level and just well, that's it. I joined this thing to quit drinking. And I have quit drinking, and I'm happy with that. Now, let's forget all this inner work stuff. Well, that's okay, too. In one sense, it is the purpose of AA. AA does not require us to go deeper, although if you really want to get down to what's going on, you really want to do inventory, you really want to keep observing yourself in step 10, you're going to have to do some of this work, okay? If we can answer the question of what is it that we will have to face, he says, we usually find that fear, daunting to the child, can be endured by the adult if we have the guts to face it. And for me, this was what I intuitively knew. I didn't even know what intuitively probably meant back then. But when I quit drinking, I knew I needed to do more than to not drink. I knew that. I knew I had to stop drinking. But I also knew that I had to stop running. That if I kept on running, I was never going to get down to the causes of what was happening inside of me and to the other side of the fear that I knew was running rampant down inside of me, okay? All right. Enough fifth step stuff here, eh? Addiction then often becomes a safe harbor that we can park our lives in, hey? It's an inner world this is the phrase he uses, that's not about what it's about. That addictions are how we learn to cope with our underlying terror. Now, addictions then become loaded. They have energy around them. They are a world in and of themselves, all right, that I live in, exist in, that you're not aware of, perhaps, not to the depth of what my attachment to these things really is, okay? He writes an interesting sentence here. He says, addictions are reflexive anxiety management systems. And he says that each of those words is important to understand if we ever hope to understand what's happening beneath the surface of our minds. Reflexive anxiety management systems. Reflexive. It means that the behavior has become habituated, second nature, happens with no thought or very little thought. I start drinking or drugging or eating, and then it starts drinking and drugging and eating. It takes over the faculty of my mind that should be there to make decisions and to be free. We are not free. We are not free. What's the Chinese expression? The man takes the drink, then the drink takes the drink, then the drink takes the man. By that point in the progression of the illness, the drink is first taking the drink itself. That's the habituation. And then the destructive thing, the drink takes the man, the drug takes the man. We're getting pulled under and going in directions that we never intended to go. Who the hell, in their early lives among us said, boy, I want to be a drug addict when I grow up. No. We were looking for some help. And this stuff did help. Don't ever forget that. I've seen too many people say, well, this is terrible, terrible stuff. Well, don't ever forget it. At some level of our sick heads, there's another thought way down there in the unconscious that says, I am the solution to your problem, and I'm patient and I'm going to wait for you, you're getting it. I'm hardly aware of my own actions and behaviors. He says, so what do? We reach for another cigarette. This is the habituated, reflexive piece he's talking about. Reach for another cigarette. Reach for a beer. Vaguely sense the anxiety that's even stirring beneath us. All right, in our depths, but we're searching unconsciously for a fix, and we know what it is. Guy told me something very interesting in early recovery. He said, watch yourself. You're going to go back to the last secure place you knew inside. And for most of us, when the anxiety builds up, the last secure place we knew was getting stoned. So the inclination, the push will be towards that last secure place that my mind knew. And then when that thought comes, logic is not operating. The frontal cortex is not operating, part of the brain that's decision-making, It's the reptilian part of the brain that says, if I don't get this sucker, I'm going to die, All right, I'm going to die. And that puts the other parts of the brain to sleep. So we go back to it. The anxiety is lessened momentarily. But then, boy, it may give you relief for a minute, if that, But then my self-esteem is lower and lower and lower than ever before. Hollis writes, if ever we are to triumph over an addiction, we must first be summoned to feel more consciously what we have already been feeling, suffer what seems insufferable, and live through this experience without the reflexive management system. I tried quitting drinking or drugging for the rest of my life, and it's overwhelming. So cut it down. I'm just not going to drink or drug or binge today. And if that's too much, this hour. And if that's too much, these next 5 minutes. Can I endure? Can I get through suffer the insufferable. I mean, we've all been there, you know? And the physical, yeah, that's going on, and we need help with that, and all for it. But after a while, it's a mental anguish that's really happening. And that's the thing we've got to face. So I call this territory the land between steps 1 and 2. Step 1 is an experience of hopelessness, right? And step 2 is on the shore, or maybe 3 gets you there, the shore of faith. The 2 says it's at least possible. It's at least possible. But in between, in early sobriety, I feel stuck. I feel like I'm going to die. Sometimes I would just get into bed at the end of the day and pull the covers over my head and regress quickly. It was like, oh, thank God that one is over. I'm doubting I can ever make it across the great divide, the abyss. I'd see people who had 3 months sobriety, 5 months, 6. How the hell did you do it? You know, they were like gods to me. You know, Hollis writes, addictions oblige us to venture into our personal underworld, wherein we experience the same thing over and over again. As noted by Satan, he was an English professor for a long while, in Paradise Lost. He says, which way I fly is hell. Wherever I turn is hell. Know that feeling? So now we're getting close to what's going on deep inside of us addicts, eh? The self that Hollis describes accurately is a quote here from another Jungian. Living a narrowed down life until there is no living. Existence, perhaps, but no living. The juice is run out. The joy of living is gone. You know, happy, joyous, and free. I don't know what the hell you're talking about at this stage, right? In active addiction, I don't know what you mean. You know, living a narrowed down life until there is no living. Existence, perhaps, but no living. He compares our stuckness to the Greek myth of Ixion. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Ixion was a character who tried to steal the fire from the gods, and that's important too. He tried to take that which did not belong to him. All right? And there's an element of this that's going on in addiction. We try to take from alcohol more than it is reasonable to give, all right? Or from food, or from sex, or from whatever the hell it might be. Oh, we're looking for it to be the solution to our living problem, all right? Give me my identity through this. So Ixion steals the fire from the gods, right? And his punishment, that at night he's placed on a wheel that keeps turning round and round and round. And there's a bird that comes and pecks away at his liver. Ixion must have been an alcoholic. He's got liver problems, all right? And in addition to stealing from the gods, he's getting the hell kicked out of him by some birds, and they're going after his liver. Then he's released from it for the next day, and then at night, so his liver starts to heal, but at night he's put back on the wheel. And over and over and over, it turns incessantly, unendingly, all right? This is pain. This is the pain of living that most of us know. The good news is that if we can survive it, if we can endure it, that pain, that past, becomes our greatest asset because we know what's going to happen if I go back there. Hollis writes, he's talking here about this reaching for the gods, reaching for the glory, all right? This search for the Holy Grail, if you into the Parsifal myth, right? This hidden spiritual desire that alcoholics have. See, I've made the statement, many of us, not all, but many of us are misplaced mystics. We're looking for that divine connection, that mystical place, nirvana. I was a hopeless utopian. There must be a place that exists somewhere where there's peace and happiness and joy and the good life. I found it at the end of a bar until I didn't. This hidden spiritual desire, this need for transcendent connection, I'm quoting Hollis here, for getting high. It was identified in the letter exchange between Carl Jung and Bill Wilson, founder of AA. Jung suggested to Bill that the 12-step programs acknowledge the profound role of our spiritual hunger, our spiritual thirst, unless the person can differentiate that quite legitimate, necessary motive from the substance upon which he or she has projected it, that person will remain its bewitched captive. Remember the story of old what's-his-name? I'm getting up close to 80 now, and these names aren't coming back as quickly as they once did. But the man who went to see Carl Jung, and Jung sent him in search of a conversion experience, a psychic change. All right, Roland Hazard, there it is. It's not quite dead, but it's on life support, that little part of my brain, right? He sent him in search of that. And he said, what you're searching for in alcohol is legitimate. It's legitimate. What you were looking for in drugs was legitimate, all right? But you're never going to find it there. It's going to look like it can provide it, but it will not. It will not. So unless the person can differentiate that quite legitimate, necessary motive from the substance upon which he or she has projected it, we have projected in our minds onto alcohol, onto drugs, onto food, this is going to fix me. It's never going to fix me. It's never going to fix me. It's a spiritual hunger that's going on. And so step 12 is what? Having had a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. It's the hero's journey, the 12 steps of the hero's journey that we have to take in order to change at great depth the mind that is within us. See, the change is going to be happening at the unconscious level. And that's why it's a gift. You can't will it. You can't force it. It may take some person a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 20 years. We don't know. But if you stay the course, if you endure, the promise is it will happen. And we see it all the time. This is what our stories are about. Freeing ourselves from our addictive behaviors requires identifying what emotional reality or perception we are defending against through the addiction and risk bearing what has been perceived as unbearable. Going through the fear rather than defending against it is the only way we can stop Ixion's wheel. It is no shame to fear abandonment. It is no shame to suffer boredom. It is no shame to experience depression until we can feel these things, really feel them, and not anesthetize them. We will remain unmotivated to change our lives. We'll be looking for magic. We'll be looking for a quick fix. It is necessary, he writes, to pierce the veil, deconstruct the mechanics of the addictive cycle, identify the primal, unassimilated idea for which our behaviors are a failing treatment plan. That's the treatment plan we're writing for ourselves. This is going to fix me, right? Then as free persons, adults, we find we can, in fact, bear the unbearable, think the unthinkable, suffer the insufferable, and be free. That, my friends, is the goal of 12-step recovery, to be free from the bondage of self, a sick self that keeps sucking me under, pulling me down, keeping me from becoming who it is I was meant to be. But the key to all of this, Hollis writes, is to track the anxiety. And this is steps 4 and 10, that whole middle section of the program. And for those of us who are fortunate enough to be in recovery, we put these fears that we are able to identify and own, we put them down on paper. And then what do? We continue to watch for them as we go on through life, because they ain't going to go away, not by themselves. He says, watch as they continue to emerge going forward. What does the book say? What we have is a daily reprieve based upon our spiritual condition. Maintain that spiritual condition, all right? And I will get through the day. And not only will I get through the day, I'll be able to look back through that day. I learned some lessons. I endured. I was resilient. I didn't die. So sometimes that's best you can get out of the day. Well, I didn't die. That was good. That's a victory. Hollis concludes this section saying this takes both insight as well as courage. Real depth recovery, I mentioned this, it is the hero's journey. It's not for the faint of heart, not if we're really going to go deep and face all the demons and the dragons that live beneath the surface. Right? Yeah, you can do the slogans and you can not drink. But I got to tell you this, there's a lot of people in 12-step recovery that I don't want what they have. But there were others who have definitely had what I wanted. And they said, well, you're willing to go to any length to get it. Because if you are, it's available for you. Ain't going to be easy. And it isn't going to be a quick fix. But come on, and if you're serious, we'll help you all the way, every step of the way. And they did. They did. And when one was through helping me, another was there ready to pick me up and carry me on the next part of the journey. Okay. Now, what's the second big category that Hollis identifies in doing depth psychology over the years? He says it's what you see is a compensation for what you don't see. Heavy stuff. All right. And here he compares the psyche, which means the whole self, the body, the soul, the mind, the spirit. He compares it to, if you remember biology, the sympathetic nervous system, the self-regulating part of us, that just as our bodies self-regulate, so too does our psyche, all right? Our mind. It's like the body self-regulates how you get a fever and the body automatically, or you get an infection rather, forgive me. You get an infection and the body spikes a fever. You don't sit down and say, well, I think I'm going to get myself a fever right now. You can't do that. All right? But it happens, and it happens automatically. Or if I'm overheating my body through exercise, I'm going to start to sweat. And what's it going to do? It's automatically going to happen, and it's going to cool me down. Catch this analogy. because he talks later about metaphor. So this is kind of where he's using that. Something in us always knows what is right for us and is undertaking measures to bring that confluence of will and nature, even as it may be oppressed by the burdens and incursions of the outer world, or opposed by our own behaviors and not so great treatment plans. So in spite of ourselves, something is at work within ourselves, righting the ship. Okay? Think of it like a little gyroscope inside of our psyches. That, remember, I think earlier in this series, I talked about, I was drunk and I was going to go to Australia and stay drunk for the rest of my life, or go to India and try to get holy there. I mean, there's the conflict. And I heard this voice that said, Bill, you're 27. If those are your choices, there's something wrong with you. And I knew in hearing that voice, it was not my normal ego consciousness. I think that's exactly what he's talking about here. All right? That something in us always knows what is right for us. And it knows when the opportunity is right to speak to us, to present an alternative view to us. You know, remember the story of the prodigal son who's, he's living with the pigs and he took his father's money and he's just blowing it on crack cocaine and all sorts of crap, And what does it say? It says that he's living with the pigs and finally, one day, he comes to his senses. It's a beautiful expression. He comes to his senses. This is where we hit bottom. And bottom is a movable feast. Your bottom and my bottom may be very different. But it isn't about how bad did it get. It's about how bad did it get for you. Have you suffered enough? Are you ready to make the turn? Are you ready to come to your senses? That's the question. That's the question. So the psyche, he says, is also compensatory. In daily life, complex-driven choices, these things that rise up and grab hold of us, move us to one side or the other, while other energies seek to bring us back in line, back to our centering systems. This is why listening is so important. Paying attention is so important. First, step 4, and then step 10 on a daily basis is vital. There's a spiritual warfare going on within us, conflicting selves at work within us, all right? And while there may be terrible and destructive pathological systems at work, the great reality is also there. And that great reality is also at work within us. For many of us, when we look at the coming together of events and people and places that were there for us when that transformation happened, when the beginning at least of that psychic change occurred, that these people and places and things were perfectly suited to make recovery possible. I can't tell you how many people have said, I got sent to jail or prison, and if I hadn't had that safety net around me, I wouldn't have made it. Or so-and-so came into my life. In Bill Wilson's case, Ebby Thatcher came into his life. And he knew Ebby was as bad a drunk as he was. But because of that, because of the synchronicity of Ebby's showing up, what were the odds? What were the odds that this person from the past would show up and bring him the message of recovery? In Wilson's letter, it didn't get much print. I'm going to have to find it again. But there was a third letter. He sent a third letter to Carl Jung in response to the Roland Hazard business. And he thanked him for, this was in 1960, he thanked him, and he said, many of us in AA have really benefited from your work, particularly synchronicity, Jung's theory of synchronicity, that things are not all accidental, that there is something at work within the universe. We don't understand it fully by any means, but there's a balancing going on. And when things get pretty terrible over here, there's something within us that can bring us back to center. Time can help with that. All right. The power greater than ourselves at work within us, if we're open to it. So looking at the overwhelming sense first faced by the little child inside of us, Hollis identifies 3 ego responses that we see at work within ourselves. These are the not-so-good things going on. The first is avoidance. We seek to avoid confrontation. I had to identify this in me. I don't like confrontation. Why? Is it because life was threatening? As children, when we were growing up, we were overwhelmed. And so we try to avoid conflict now. And how do we do that? Well, we avoid it in part by numbing ourselves. I'm not going to feel, all right, because it's too much for me, all right? So we take something or do some behavior that will help us to not feel. I heard people say alcoholics and addicts, they don't feel. Well, maybe it's the exact opposite of that. Maybe as kids, we felt too much. And so now we're looking for ways to avoid those feelings. We postpone things, he says. We put it off. Maybe if I put it off long enough, it'll all go away. Watch for those things going on in your life. If I don't deal with it, maybe it'll disappear. We blame others and we project onto them. So what? So we don't have to face these things within ourselves. All right? And we hone these things down to a real skill. We stuff it all down. We repress it. We dissociate in extreme cases. We're not even present for our own lives. Avoidance. And as we avoid, the consequences pile up as we go. The second response to overwhelmment, he says, is compliant. And this he identifies in 12-step language with codependence. Most of us, if we're not getting sober right off the bat, look to codependence, look to traumatic childhoods at work underneath the hood. On the surface, I'm all sweet and amiable, he says. This is your love addict. I'm such a sweet, loving person, all right? But underneath the hood, there's an archaic fear, an old fear, all right? It's operating, and I'm afraid to be myself because that self got overwhelmed long, long ago. And it's terrified that it's going to happen to me again. All right? So I'm going to comply. I'm going to go along with on the surface. But beneath the surface, no way. All right? Hollis writes, in time, the cost of such accommodation leads to a loss of integrity, as well as to depression or anger and the loss of one's freedom. Quote, remembering that one's definition of depression is learned helplessness. And another definition is anger turned within. He says, we see that codependent avoidance is a costly protection of the child we were. And this is the reason I think inner child work is, and I won't say it's vital, but if you really want to get to see what is going on in the inner world, at some point or other, I think we have to go and revisit and rescue that child that is within. Because not only did perhaps parents abandon us, we abandoned the kid. And that's perhaps the greatest hurt of all. and the source of great distrust. You left me. Your ego consciousness left me. And so I'm rummaging around down here in the basement, and I am pissed. I'm pissed. Every time I get a chance to come up the stairs, look out. Third response, power complexes. The complex is just a stuck part of me, all right? We're stuck at immature power game levels, all right? Where I'm in charge. I have to be in charge. And you are not in charge. And I'm ready to fight to get my way. This is why relationships are so hard for us. Why am I so angry right now? Even over some of the smallest damn things. Maybe it's because inside I'm 5 or 6 years old and I'm feeling overwhelmed and rageful because it's the only way I know how to cope. Hollis goes on to identify 3 strategies we may have settled on to deal with our abandonment issues. Again, this is not a healthy way of doing it, but we did it. First is low self-worth. He writes, given that each of us began life reading the environment for messages, we usually consider that those messages are not only about the world, but also about us directly. Putting it bluntly and literally, he writes, what happens to me is about me and may even identify and define me. If you knew the real me, you wouldn't like me either. Accordingly, if our early relationships were characterized by a sense of not enoughness, we usually internalize this experience as a statement about our own diminished worthiness or capacities. Such wounds to self-esteem are common and subsequently show up in 2 seemingly contradictory ways. The most common is self-denigration. I was in treatment, and the therapist asked me, hey, Bill, he said, if somebody said to you the things you say to you about yourself, what would you do to that guy? Didn't miss a beat. I said, I'd kill the son of a bitch. I'd kill him. And his response was, good morning. Isn't that what you've been doing? Isn't that really what your addiction is about at the deepest levels that you are not aware of? Self-denigration. Or there's an opposite. We may be caught in overcompensation. Look at how wealthy I am. Look at how wonderful and accomplished my children are. Or look at all of my achievements. He says, when we see these familiar behaviors, we may be sure that the person is actually acting. When we see these familiar behaviors, we may be sure that the person is acting actually out of a diminished sense of self-worth. The second strategy for dealing with abandonment issues is neediness, a hunger for approval and reassurance, and there's never enough. Who stopped clapping first? It's never enough. Quote, this may be hidden by making oneself indispensable to others. It may exude poison into the world via envy or jealousy. More commonly, it manifests in such a repetitive solicitation of the approval of others that it tends to drive others away. Oh, that one hurt. The third and final strategy, he notes, is narcissism. Quote, selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our problem, unquote. Some of us are so self-centered, we're actually incapable of forming deep and meaningful relationships. But that is a distinct minority. A lot of us think, well, that must be me. Be careful. There aren't that many narcissists in the world. There are quite a few, but not in the program. Not if you can experience guilt and shame and that sort of stuff. It's if you can't experience guilt and shame, look out. So remember, many of us do recover if we have the capacity to be honest, and if we can stay the course and go and dig deep. Hollis concludes this subsection saying, what we see are behavioral patterns. What we don't see are the archaic interpretations of self and world within each of us, and from whence they enter the world. See, these things bubble up inside of us, and they take over our conscious mind. Right? It's like a raid. He says, go back to that iceberg analogy. He says that there's where the two worlds meet, the conscious world and the unconscious world, kind of a no man's land between the two. And little raiding parties come up from one and attack the hell out of the others. Boy, I just got raided, I love the expression, forgive me for what I said yesterday. I wasn't myself. Well, the answer to that is, well, who the hell were you then? Of course you were yourself. But you were a self that you're not in touch with, a shadow self, an unconscious self. I need to go and get to know that unconscious. Jung had a marvelous expression. He said, you go and meet the unconscious, or the unconscious will come and meet you. Another phrase, how you treat the unconscious is kind of the attitude that the unconscious will take towards you. Treat it with respect, treat it with dignity, it will return the favor. Treat it in an abusive manner, and it will return that favor too. So, until we go below, see what we can see, we cannot begin to understand where we really live. Okay? I think you're starting to get that. All right, the third and final principle Hollis identifies is that all is metaphor. All right, and I'm running out of steam here, so I'm going to go quickly on this one. Hollis claims the human psyche is always speaking to us, and this is very important, but it speaks in the language of metaphor and symbol. Its language is not the language of the conscious mind. It's different. It speaks in metaphor. It's the right brain, left brain analytical, mathematical, they're very, very logical. Right brain, not so much. Not so much. Poetry, music, all right? Mystical experiences. The language of metaphor and symbols. Uses the example, my love, a poet, compares his beloved to a rose. Well, we get it. Is he saying her petals are falling off? She's only good for a week or two? What's he saying? No, he's using a metaphor to help us appreciate the inexplicable that he's trying to explain. Poets do it. Music does it. It grabs you. Grabs you how? By the soul. You see? By the soul. Soul music. Soul food. See? Now you're starting to get down to where this, and it's metaphor and it's symbol. All metaphor. He says it does this through several ways. It speaks to us. How does it speak to us? How does the psyche, the soul, speak to us? The unconscious mind. Again, we're going to fly. First one, he says, is through our feeling function. How the psyche is registering the present moment. Pay attention to your feelings. They're neither good nor bad, but we have to pay attention to them because they're trying to tell us something. So listen to them. Don't push them down. This is where step 10 is learning to sense, feel what's going on in my life. I love it, the force. Is it with you or is it not? Your little Yoda Knights there, is the force operating or is it not? Second is the transcendent function. That our souls are meant to be in conscious contact with the transcendent. We are built for divinity. We are built to be in relationship with what one mystic calls the beyond that is within. It's one of my favorite expressions, the transcendent. I'm to be connected to that. I draw my strength from that, my energy from that, my meaning from that, my purpose from that. Religion at one time did that, less and less so today, okay? So I have to find that within myself, all right? And we need to be in right relationship with that. And that's what the big book is pointing us towards. You know, he's the father, we are the children. Get that relationship right. He's the director, we are the actors. All good ideas are simple. There's a linkage, a connecting link between the conscious mind and the unconscious, between the ego and the psyche. What's happening on that highway? Is it clear flowing and productive? Intuition? Insight? Age of miracles happening? Is the world bright and shining? Or is it depressed and if so, why? Have I lost my contact, my connection with that inner world? I lose it all the time. I have to go back and reestablish it. And I think two-way prayer can be very helpful here. I don't just sit down and pray, like pop in a quarter and out comes God's answer. First, I sit down and I watch. How am I doing? What's the strength of my connection? How did I do yesterday? Did I do the guidance I was asked to do? Or did I blow it off? Was I honest, pure, unselfish, loving in my reactions to people, in my receptivity to myself? How'd I do? You look at that first, because that's going to determine your prayer. See? Third is physical symptoms. Pay attention to my body. My body is telling me something. What is behind or who is behind that pain in my neck? The knot in my stomach, the tightness in my chest. Watch yourself. Listen to yourself. Relax yourself. Into what? Into the beyond that is within. Right? Into the great reality. This is what brings all of this stuff to life. All right. Fourth is dreams. Get a book on dreams. Begin to learn the language of dreams. When I have a dream that I remember, first thing I do in my two-way prayers, I write that dream down before anything, because it's going to be gone in a minute. To try to write it down, try to capture it, get as many parts as you can find, and then begin to talk to maybe some of those characters in the dream. Why did you come? Why did you show up in my life? What is it you're trying to tell me? And the fifth is active imagination. We'll kind of get into that just there. Listening to the energies, negative and positive, that are coursing through my life. I mean, the part of, I'm at 20 years sober, my AA life was kind of in the bucket, it was in the garbage heap. I mean, I wasn't drinking. I don't think I was all that close to drinking either. But there was no electricity, no fire, no life, no zip, no juice to it. And I only got to that by learning to go inside, to go deeper. I didn't need another 90 meetings in 90 days. I needed connection to the beyond that is within. Hollis ends his chapter with a quote from Jung. I really liked it. And I'm going to finally end this thing. Sorry for going so long. But Jung said this: every moment of our lives is trying to tell us something, but we do not care to listen to this spirit voice. When we are alone and still, we are afraid that something will be whispered in our ears. And so we hate the stillness and anesthetize ourselves in one way or another. This has been heavy stuff. I guess that's why they call it depth psychology. You got to wade in the water here. But if you made it through this episode, congratulations. The big book, as I said before, it tells us the great reality is within. And what Jung is trying to tell us is that the great reality, the greater personality, he called it, the Christ mind, the Buddha mind, Robert Johnson calls it. You call it what you will. It has business with us. It wants to manifest itself through our lives and through us out into the world. You are an experiment of the great reality, and we want to be successful experiments, and it makes a huge difference, therefore, if we can learn to wait and to watch and to listen. Listen to what? To listen to our souls, to listen to our lives, to listen to the still small voice that is within each and every one of us. So my hope is this was helpful, maybe even if it's just in some small ways, that you get some insights into what is happening. I've been kind of going after this stuff for 30 years or so. I'm just at the surface of things. So hope it was helpful. If it wasn't, please forgive me and come back next week. Meanwhile, stay sober, God bless, and do keep coming back.